All right. My name is Matthew, and this is my review of Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. Greenlights is a memoir that Matthew McConaughey recently released. It is a little bit different than your normal memoir. While the majority of the text is narrative form, it spans through kind of his high school age through to current day. The thing that makes it really interesting are the excerpts that he's put throughout the memoir. It includes snapshots of himself and his family and things like that, as well as like journal entries, quotes, and kind of random thoughts that loosely tie to the narrative. It's an interesting way to do a memoir. It's a great take on a memoir, and I love his ingenuity and kind of his creativity in it. Now we'll kind of go through some of the things that I liked and some of the things I didn't like about the memoir, loosely starting with some of my favorite things and then moving through the list to the last things will be some of my least favorite things about the memoir. My favorite thing about the memoir was the narrative throughout. The majority of the text is a narrative, and Matthew McConaughey is an amazing storyteller. I think he is just really incredible, actually. He uses very informal language that ties you in right away. And throughout the entire memoir, I felt like I was sitting across the table enjoying a drink with Matthew McConaughey and not that I was reading a book. His style is really interesting. It's filled with like, not cliches, but like aphorisms and like idioms and like little phrases that really tie you in. It also reminds you of who he is, where, you know, kind of his accent is kind of there. Every time he says, all right, you're like, oh, I'll try out his accent. Okay. And the way he spells certain words and poems that he's added in, it's like Matthew is really there talking to you and not like you're reading his book. Easily the best part of this memoir is the narrative itself, and the way Matthew has written it really is masterful. I really enjoyed reading the narrative. The excerpts were really interesting. They always related in some way to the narrative, but sometimes it was a bit of a stretch. These are random thoughts and poems and things that Matthew McConaughey has taken down over the years, and they're really kind of glimpses into the rambling head of Matthew McConaughey. So in addition to the narrative, which feels like you're just sitting there like sharing war stories, you also actually get kind of glimpses into his head from when he was 25 and when he was 30 and all those different things. Something I liked about this book is it was not trying to be a super deep, ultra spiritual, like soul find type book. Instead, it was simple wisdoms. A lot of times you would read the excerpts or even the narrative itself, and instead of thinking to yourself, wow, that's so deep, I've never thought of that before, I tended to think, oh yeah, I forgot that I need to keep doing that. It was like reminders of things that I already knew. It's the simple truths like, yeah, a walk around in nature can have a profound effect on your soul. It can really be something you need. And the book is really full of these types of truths. They're simple, they're not profound. They are profound. Yeah, it's those, you know, but there's nothing like super deep and like you're not going to find yourself and it's not going to create this awesome like new you, but they are simple truths that we all can use reminders about. So a couple things I'm not as big a fan about in the book. One of them is the title of it is Greenlights, and this is a word that Matthew McConaughey uses like 24 times in the book. He uses them as kind of placeholders between stories, and at first I was on board with them. I was like, oh yeah, these are great. They were like launch pads into the next stage of his career or the next stage of his life. But then as the book goes on, I feel like I didn't understand them maybe. Maybe it's a me thing. Maybe it's something that I just missed on somehow. But I felt like they didn't really mean anything by the end of the book, because sometimes he used it when things happened to him, and sometimes when he did things, and sometimes when it was profound and launched him to the next thing, and sometimes when it was just random. I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand Greenlights and someone needs to explain it to me. But I felt like I just missed it. I was like, it was cute at first, and then now I don't understand what they actually mean. So maybe they just didn't get defined well enough, and it hurt me in the story when I would kind of get launched out of it, because I was like, oh, green lights again. Okay, cool. The other thing that it doesn't necessarily bother me, but I think that it's a trigger warning that you guys maybe just need to know about. One is the book has got a lot of language in it. In fact, it opens with language. So if that bothers you, this is probably not the book for you. The other things that it has is a fair amount of like sexual, not like graphic sexual content, but some sexual type content. And then also a lot of drug references. Matthew McConaughey is apparently a prolific user of drugs, and he's not afraid to tell you that in his memoir. The one thing I didn't like, I don't necessarily mind if people are telling you about their drug usage and those types of things, but the thing I didn't really like is his use of this idea, outlaw rules, which apparently is something his family kind of lives by. It's like one description of outlaw rules was like, hey, it's okay to do whatever you want as long as you don't get caught. It feels kind of immoral to me. I'm not as big a fan of that. Again, maybe he's just describing the way that he lives his life, and that's fine, but it felt odd in a book that had some really great truths and wisdoms in it to also have this kind of glorification of outlaw rules along with the sexual and the drugs and the everything else, and it just felt a little out of place. But again, it's not necessarily that this isn't good for you. It's just something that I'm not as big a fan of. So is this a book that I recommend? I actually do. I really liked this book. It's a relatively easy read. It's written in a way that anyone could pick it up and read it. It's relatively short. Even a slow reader could probably read it in, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours or something. And it's interesting enough to keep you kind of moving along. Matthew McConaughey really is a good storyteller, and I think this is an entertaining book. If you are a fan of Matthew McConaughey, if you like his work and you want a glimpse into some of his life, I think this is an interesting book. Feel free to pick it up. This has been my review of Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. If you enjoyed this content, do feel free to like and subscribe, and as always, stay safe out there.